So as we usually do, we'll begin with chanting of the three refuges slowly, harmonizing. Even for those of you on Zoom, we just do the best to hear the sound coming from the Dharma Hall here in Minneapolis, but joining our voice. And remember, we're just bringing up for ourselves, finding our way back to our deepest aspiration in our life. Really valuing awareness, this capacity we have to be aware, to be intimate with reality as it is, the activity of the body, the mind, the underlying nature, in a way that's conducive for release, which allows for a more nimble and creative and compassionate engagement in our life and all the conditions of our lives. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. And I'd like to begin our meditation time reading a little bit from Joseph Goldstein's book. I think it was probably his first book, The Experience of Insight. And this is the chapter on the factors of enlightenment or the factors of awakening. These are the 7 qualities of enlightenment that have been brought to maturity in our practice. 3 of them are arousing factors, 3 of them are tranquilizing ones. Wisdom, energy, rapture, all arouse the mind. They make it wakeful and alert. Calm, concentration, and equanimity tranquilize the mind and make it still. They all have to be in harmony. If there is too much arousal, the mind becomes restless. If there's too much tranquility, it goes to sleep. The factor of mindfulness is so powerful because it not only serves to awaken and strengthen all the other factors, but it also keeps them in their proper balance. The evolution of the mind along this path can fill one with a tremendous inspiration and encouragement. Imagine a mind that has brought to full development mindfulness, wisdom, energy, rapture, calm, concentration, and equanimity. It is a mind which is shiny and full of joy. That is what we are doing. Not only do the factors of enlightenment bring happiness in the moment, but all of them slope to nibbana, toward enlightenment, toward freedom. Sometimes from day to day, it's easy to forget what it is we are doing in dealing with the restlessness and pains and aches and wandering mind. But what is happening imperceptibly from moment to moment to moment, but very progressively, surely and steadily, is the development and growth of these limbs of awakening. It is a very great thing that is being done. It is the noblest evolution of the mind. So do whatever is needed to support settling, doing what we can to support relaxation and alertness, the stability of this mindful presence with the activity of the body and the mind now. And we don't need a different experience to support the stability of present moment awareness. The stability is going to arise right here and now with the experience that's here. And we'll take some time and we'll contemplate the factor of awakening of mindfulness. So this is knowing. The mind knows that this is being known. So if you're aware of the breath, for example, as a natural process happening here in the body, then the presence of mindfulness means the mind knows that breathing in is being known. And the mind knows when breathing out is being known. So in this sense, it's a reflective knowing what the mind is knowing. Or you could say it's an awareness of knowing. What's the mind knowing? It might be knowing the meditation object, breathing in, breathing out, or more generally, the experience of embodiment. Or the mind might be knowing some distraction, mental activity. So we're learning to both recognize mindfulness, but also appreciate it, see it as something good. It's this appreciating and recognizing that actually strengthens this factor. And then, of course, if this continuity of mindfulness is not there, then be interested in what's in the way. What hindrance is hindering the continuity of awareness? Is it greed, wanting something? Is it aversion? Is it dullness or restlessness or doubt? And how to be aware of the hindrance in a way that weakens it, as opposed to being aware of it in a way that feeds it. And in the most straightforward way, we are simply learning to take care of the mind right now. How to pay attention in a way that allows us to take care of the heart and mind. That's it. And this investigation, this interest in taking care of the mind is really this factor of awakening we call investigation. It's basically observing cause and effect so that the mind becomes wiser at planting seeds for stability and ease and letting go, as opposed to planting seeds for contraction and agitation and distractedness. So in this sense, the continuity of mindfulness is in the service of discerning or contemplating cause and effect. This is the investigation piece. What allows the mind to settle, become clearer, more easeful, more joyful. How is it that the mind ends up superficial or agitated? And to whatever degree wisdom senses that this investigation, this simple tracking of the mind is really helpful, then energy, the factor of awakening of energy or persistence, begins to build. The mind really wants to persist in being present and learning how to cultivate a more stable, easeful, insightful mind. Because it feels right, it feels healing and releasing. So notice that steadfastness, that persistence to begin again. We need some faith that we have all the ingredients right here already to cultivate a beautiful heart and mind. A mind, a heart that is actually healing and transforming. So we'll have some silence now just to act on that confidence or that faith with mindfulness and investigation and steadfastness. And be aware of this next fact of awakening of joy, joyful interest, rapture, that sense of flow of lightness, flow of buoyancy. It is the very lawful or natural result of being persistent in discerning what's helpful and unhelpful, observing the unfolding of the moment in terms of what is in the direction of more stressful states and what's in the direction of release and allowing and letting things be. So joy is the natural experience of the heart, the mind coming more and more into the alignment with things just as they are, not in conflict with the moment, with experience. And this alignment comes from the mindfulness and the investigation and persisting, being patient, beginning again. We're just studying the moment in a simple, direct way in terms of what helps, how to pay attention, how to be present in a way that actually leads in the direction of ease and joy. And of course, it's all grounded in our capacity to be present, which is this knowing that this is being known. So mindfulness and investigation and persistence, energy, will reveal the natural joy and tranquility, contentedness, ease that naturally follow. So acknowledge these factors, even when they're relatively faint. Acknowledge the joy, sense it. Acknowledge the tranquility, contentedness, and ease. The sense of the body and the heart not wanting to move, not needing to do or go anywhere because of the tranquility. Settled. So in a sense, we investigate the quality of tranquility to see what helps it to grow and deepen, and what might diminish it, weaken it. So we can learn how to develop the quality of tranquility in a beautiful way. It's really okay to recognize this ease of tranquility, to in a sense, to taste it, let it have its effect on the body and mind. Because it naturally leads to a deeper stillness or concentration, unavoidably, which you can begin to notice whenever it's apparent. Just that inner silence or inner stillness. And although subtle, we can keep this factor of samadhi, concentration in mind, this still, silent space of the mind, not the activity of what comes and goes, but just the peace and silence and stillness of the mind itself. And this quality of concentration can develop to such a degree that the mind, in a way, rests in peace and isn't really that interested in other experiences. And this will reveal this beautiful, radiant balance of equanimity. The mind that's not pushed around by pleasant and unpleasant. Not trying to feed off of sense experience. Not dependent on sense experience, but rather resting in peace, but still aware, still present. See if you can sense that equipoise, that balance, or non-reactivity. And before we end our meditation, how about each of us on our own contemplate each of the 7 factors of awakening, each one for a few seconds, just to get clear. So just to remind you, there's mindfulness and investigation or wisdom. There's energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. Just sensing the presence of all 7 factors in the heart as best you can. And take a little time, adjust the body. Well, welcome everyone. Excuse me. This is our last class in this series, actually, where we started last winter on mindfulness of the body, then mindfulness of feeling tone in the spring, mindfulness of the mind in the summer, and now this fall, mindfulness of mental qualities or mindfulness of the Dhammas. And this list in particular, we're really learning to aim the mind, let's say, aim the heart towards release. So with the first 3 that we studied in the winter, the spring, and summer, where we're just getting to know the activity of the body and the mind with some clarity. So a lot of what we were doing is cultivating wise view, a wise understanding, so we could actually be aware of the body. Because, when we hear the instruction, be aware of the body, mostly what are we knowing? The concept, the ideas we have about the body. Same with feeling tone, same with the mind. So in terms of these 4 foundations of mindfulness, a lot of the instructions in this collection of teachings from the Buddha is just helping us. In a way, it's preliminary because it's not so much telling us to be mindful, it's giving us some practices so that we can get some space, some freedom from wrong view, the wrong idea of what the body is, and actually be with the body, be with feeling tone, be with the mind. Then when we can actually be present, then we can really shape the mind. That's really what this 4th foundation, it's sort of a strange title, mindfulness of Dhammas, mindfulness of mental qualities. It's basically learning how to starve the hindrances and develop or feed the awakening factors. How we pay attention, what we pay attention to really matters. It's a karmic act, we say, because we're in this this foundation of mindfulness in particular, we're paying attention with intention. We're paying attention to the hindrances and the factors of awakening on purpose to starve the hindrances and strengthen the factors. But it's not complicated. It's just basically seeing the hindrances for what they are, that they hinder the continuity, the clarity, right? That's enough to weaken them. It's the not recognizing the hindering effect of the hindrances, like we're angry, but we don't realize how self-destructive the anger is. So then we keep spinning with our angry thoughts and revenge fantasies and on and on. But soon as we, like some of the disgusting images, like one is just a handful of manure. You're angry, you want to throw it at somebody. Well, who gets it on them first? We do. And it's when we see that, like if we actually had a mirror in front of us when we're angry, or whatever kind of unhealthy, unhelpful state, if we actually could see the picture, not just the kind of external picture, but if we could somehow sense directly, which we can learn to be aware of that quality of the heart, we would be appropriately disgusted. Oh, this is not what I want to set in motion. I understand why I'm lustful, why I'm hateful, why I'm, deluded. But this is not what I want to set in motion in my heart, in my life, in the world. None of us need more of this, right? But because we're oblivious, we can actually be cultivating unhelpful states for a long time, but only because we're not seeing clearly. So with the factors of awakening, it can be a real game changer because we're not given that much permission and encouragement to notice the beautiful, wholesome qualities. And I really encourage that we've sort of spent the last 4 weeks or more looking at the factors of awakening. Those of you who are artists, put something up somewhere in your home where you'll remember these 7 factors. It would just be such a wonderful thing if someone made a resolve, strong resolve, like we could all do right now. Once a day, at least once a day, I'm going to bring to mind these 7 factors. And I'm going to bring them to mind with enough time and enough interest. So as I bring up each of the 7 factors, mindfulness, this investigation of Dhammas is how but it's really the wisdom factor, being interested in the way it is, being interested in what's skillful and unskillful. So that's that second one. Energy, and we have energy because we sense how useful it is to be developing the wisdom factor of noticing what's helpful and not helpful. So the heart becomes steadfast, ardent. Oh yeah, this is good stuff. I'm going to stick to this discernment. And when those 3 build up some momentum, there's some real flow because the mind is really coming into alignment with the way it is. It's not in conflict with the moment. It's really aligned with being intimate with the moment in order to understand it. And there's some buoyancy that arises then, some joy. And the joy ignites the ease of heart, the tranquility, a more profound settling. And I mentioned just on a gross outer level, that tranquility is that feeling of, I don't want to move, don't want to do, don't want to go. There's a contentment to be to be being where you are, doing what you're doing, not needing to move. Like even mentally, I don't even want to go there. I am totally fine being here. I could think of that, but there's a sort of settledness. And it really has a sense of like, not going to budge from the present moment. And that just matures into concentration, stillness. And that one of the characteristics of deeper concentration is the peace. Like tranquility is more naturally pleasant. It's a pleasant experience. But when the stillness of concentration is more developed, it's like what makes the mind so peaceful is it's in a way beyond pleasant and unpleasant. The stillness, the silence, the space is sort of removed enough from the normal agitated place of like looking for a nice experience, looking to get away from an unpleasant experience. It just is distant from that, and that's why it's so peaceful. The mind has some immunity from desire. Because desire is an agitating force in the mind, even like a relatively wholesome desire. So that's the stillness. And that matures, it sort of affects the mind's understanding, or it affects the mind's relationship to sense experience. So now the mind, which is aware, it has greater capacity for awareness, so the concentration doesn't just have to be retreated. That stillness can be in the realm of eyes that see and ears that hear and skin that feels, touches. But now the mind has a different relationship to sense experience. It's not pushed around by pleasure and pain. Because of this stillness or this peace, right? It knows equanimity is the mind, and I'll talk more about this tonight, but the mind has a different relationship to sense experience that can arise from both, in part from seclusion, like just being away from provocative sense experience. But the deeper equanimity arises because of wisdom. Like that the pleasant and unpleasant sense experiences aren't worthy of reactivity. So somebody brings over a freshly baked apple pie, good friend walks in, they've got really good vanilla ice cream to go with the warm pie. It's going to be really pleasant. But equanimity, it's not like oblivious to the fact that it will be pleasant, but it's like seeing that whole experience from a vast view. Like this is sort of simplistic, but an ordinary mind, a relatively unwise mind, would be totally focused on the first bites and how nice it's going to be. But just to kind of get a sense of what equanimity is, it's understanding that experience of eating the apple pie in terms of the billions of seconds of my life. So there'll be those seconds, but in the context of whatever it is, billions or millions of seconds of moments. So all of a sudden, the intensity of that pleasure of eating the warm apple pie with nice ice cream, in the great scheme of things, it isn't much ado about nothing. Or it is much ado about nothing, right? It's the same thing, when you go buy your next cell phone or your next car, and you just have the big picture instead of like how nice it will be to have a cell phone that has batteries that last more than 2 hours or something like that. But you're aware of the whole arc. It will probably be nice for a while, and then it will be out of date, and then it will start having problems. and then it will be useless. And you see how that evoked that, just the biggest perspective. And this is that balance of equanimity. It's like you get something really nice, but you get that thing you've wanted for a long time with the context that you're going to die someday and you don't know when. What sort of changes is like, okay, I got the cabin, but I can't really use it to make me happy forever because I know I'm going to die and I don't know when. And it sort of takes away the delusion that this sense experience, whether it's a positive one or a negative one, unpleasant one, it's just less impactful. So this just gives you a flavor of the equanimity. So this is the request, and I mentioned early on in the course that, at the time, the nuns and monks, they would use this list of 7 and the teachings around these 7 factors as a way to bring about healing. Because, a lot of what, I'm just talking about ordinary healing, like somebody's got a terrible illness or whatever, and they ask a fellow monastic to come and chant the teachings around the 7 factors of awakening. Because just the fact that there are these qualities, these inherent qualities of the mind that can be developed and cultivated and brought into balance, and how when brought into balance, they inevitably slope to nibbana, toward the release, the unshakable release of the heart. It just changes the mind's relationship to the cancer or the aging or the whatever's going on. Because without these kinds of teachings, these difficult experiences that show up for us eventually, we feel really cornered. It's like this thing is taking my health away, or this situation at work is taking my financial security away. And if that's the ground that we get our ease from, because I've got a job, or I've got my health, or I have this relationship, and then it's gone, we really feel like a cornered animal when those things happen. I'm sure we all have our own experiences where, something was taken away that we weren't expecting, and we were really attached, and we felt really exposed. And so if somebody were to come in and to remind us of something that we've been developing our understanding around, there is a way to bring this heart into balance here and now in the present moment, in a way, not theoretically, it's not like based on belief, it's based on experience. This is really the taste of freedom the Buddha talks about. And we want to be on the lookout for the taste of freedom. I don't know if people saw, but when I sent the email reminding you about the class tonight out earlier this afternoon, I included a link for an article by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, a wonderful translator and Buddhist monk. He's the abbot of a monastery outside of San Diego, Wat Metta. Wat is the Thai word for monastery. And so he's a Westerner, but he practiced in Thailand for many years before coming back to the United States. And it's about some of his teachers, and one of his Thai forest elders, a respected teacher in Thailand that he was able to practice with, had this really, I think, beautiful teaching. And it's the title of the article, that mountains are only heavy if you try to lift them. And it's really, it speaks to equanimity, and it really speaks to the whole path, the unshakable release. Because, the difference between a Buddha and you and me isn't that the Buddha does have an aging body, or a body susceptible to sickness, or in the Buddha's case, a life susceptible to his even evil cousin, Devadatta. I don't know if you know the stories of Devadatta, but he was able to concentrate his mind pretty well, and he had some psychic powers, as the stories go. But he was really jealous of the Buddha, and he wanted, recognition, and wanted to take over the monastic sangha, and did some terrible things to the Buddha. So the Buddha has these, flies and mosquitoes and evil cousins, and just like we do in his life. So what is that unshakable release, right? So when those difficult or beautiful things show up, if the mind comes into conflict, like, I really want this beautiful thing to last and to be just the way I want it to be, or I really want this terrible thing to go away, then the heart is in a way at war, in conflict with the underlying nature that things come and go according to innumerable causes and conditions. Nobody is in control, governing the unfolding. And so the release, these factors of awakening, when they're in balance, then that mind, in a way, it describes the mind that can come into alignment with experience, with the way it is. The mind that has no need for craving, no need for hatred or delusion, because it has the capacity to be in alignment. So that mind is empty of ignorance, empty of greed, hatred, and delusion, empty of craving, empty of selfing. And it's like the taste of that freedom, when we have even a little glimpse, or the mind moves some in that direction, it's really a sense that the aftertaste is, it's not a problem. I don't know why it's not a problem, but we might be losing somebody we love, or we might be recognizing that my hair is falling out as I get older, or my body's not as capable as it used to be because of the aging process, or any of the normal insults. But the taste of freedom is the release of the heart isn't dependent on these conditions. The ease, release of the heart isn't dependent on being in control, or isn't dependent on anything. That's what that sense of alignment reveals, that non-dependence. That's why we say that awakening is described as an unconditioned happiness. It's not a happiness that's there in our heart because of some condition. It's a happiness that's there because the mind has come into alignment. And this teaching, in the fourth foundation, is really about how do we cultivate the conditions for awakening. It might have been Trungpa Rinpoche, this well-known Tibetan teacher, controversial Tibetan teacher in the 60s and 70s. I forget when he died, maybe early 80s. But I think it was him who said, awakening is an accident, and practice is making ourselves accident prone. And in a way, it's like remembering the factors of awakening, making them good friends, bringing them to mind, learning to recognize them, learning how to shape the mind with these 7 factors, so that the mind is really, truly a thing of beauty, the balance of it. It's a nice reflection with equanimity to really see it as a beautiful thing when the mind is really balanced, not reacting to experience, but really there, vividly present, intimate with sound, thought, whatever might be coming and going in the field of awareness. But this equanimity, the balance, remains unmoved, clear, sensitive, or intimate, but unmoved. And the Buddha talks about it exactly this way. Praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and sorrow come and go like the wind. To be happy rests like a giant tree in the midst of them all. In another way, he used the image of a rock that remains unshaken. A mind unshaken when touched by worldly states, sorrowless, stainless, secure. This is the blessing supreme. Another place, the Buddha says that a practitioner becomes worthy of respect and offerings if they are neither elated nor depressed in regard to what is experienced through the six senses. Remember, the mind, mental activities, the sixth of the six senses, but instead dwells with equanimity, mindfulness, and clear comprehension. And even as an idea, this is quite powerful. So if you're going to think about stuff, mentally proliferate, talk to your friends, talk to them about the 7 factors of awakening and equanimity, right? Because it's like sometimes I call it a wormhole, like because we've had some experience already with equanimity, just like we know reactivity pretty well. Anybody not know the experience of reactivity? When our mind is really on the edge, sensitive, and just basically hunting for the next thing to react to. Like when we're irritable, we're just looking for the next thing to bother me. It really stands out when we're married or you're living with someone, because it's just so ridiculous, that state where you're just like, and it may be that you're not even bothered by the person initially, but they're just sort of conveniently there so that you can continue your outrage about what's not perfect in the world and notice this and notice that. And you can even notice that there's frustration if you can't find things to be frustrated by, right? It's like, damn. And then generally we turn the news on so we find more things to be frustrated by, right? To keep the fires of hatred, aversion going. This is from Shaila Catherine, good friend of mine, or a Dharma friend of mine. And she's also a wonderful Buddhist author, a Dharma teacher in San Jose, but she teaches around. And she wrote a nice article, Equanimity in Every Bite, where she wrote, neither the coarse feeling of unpleasantness nor the agitated feeling of pleasure, equanimity, the Buddha said, is one of the highest kinds of happiness, beyond compare with mere pleasant feelings. Superior to delight and joy, true equanimity remains undisturbed as events change from hot to cold, from bitter to sweet, from easy to difficult. This neutral feeling is so subtle that it can be difficult to discern. Yeah, it's like a whole new vocabulary, like getting to know evenness, getting to know balance. Because the mind has really mostly been dominated by reactivity and conflict, hope and fear, right? These sort of more agitated states. And so when we start to access and have more experiences of equanimity, it can kind of throw the mind for a loop. Like, I remember I've mentioned this to some of you before on a longer retreat, just having more states of equanimity. And I remember for several days I felt off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what was going on. Something felt off, a little flat, nothing's happening. And then I just remember one moment, after being a little bit frustrated by not being able to comprehend what it is that was happening. And it was just like this dawning, wow, this is equanimity. This is this seeing, experiencing equanimity in a way the mind hadn't seen it or experienced it before. More stable, more pronounced, dominating the mind in a way it hadn't really, that I remembered, dominated the mind. And it's like cultivating a taste. Just like, when in the Buddhist framework, the deepest happiness is this peace. It isn't ecstasy. There is definitely ecstasy, just different, like we talked about, if you weren't here a couple of weeks ago, and I even gave you that little section from Joseph Goldstein, a different book of Joseph Goldstein, where he talks about the 5 types of rapture, right? Really, vivid descriptions of those energetic, ecstatic experiences that can arise, that sort of showering of joy through the body and mind. But it isn't the deepest happiness. And she goes on here in this article, this is Shaila Catherine again. Equanimity is steady through the vicissitudes, equally close to the things you may like and the things you do not like. Right? So that's the cool thing about equanimity, the steadiness, the intimacy with conditions, with reality, don't get disturbed when it goes from pleasant to unpleasant or unpleasant to pleasant, because the balance is more unconditioned, right? And remember, the superficial kind of equanimity is that balance that arises because all the conditions are nice. You put me in a certain environment where I have everything I like, my mind will be pretty equanimous, pretty balanced. But that's an equanimity that's there because I have everything I want. The conditions are just right. Someone's rubbing my shoulders and nice breeze, not too much, not too little, good view, all those sort of things. And there's that natural contentment and balance. But you start taking some of those nice factors away, and then the mind's agitated. So she's really talking like with the deeper equanimity, it really isn't dependent on conditions. Observe when the tendency to move away from what you do not like ends, and the tendency to hold on to what you do like is also absent. Personal preference no longer dictates the direction of attention. Equanimity contains the complete willingness to behold the pleasant and the painful events of life equally. Now it's like this. Now it's like this. It points to a deep balance in which you are not pushed and pulled between the coercive energies of desire and aversion. Equanimity has the capacity to embrace extremes without getting thrown off balance. Equanimity takes interest in whatever is occurring simply because it is occurring, right? Intimate, not because I chose or I want. Intimate because this is what's arising. This is here. Equanimity does not include the aversive states of indifference, boredom, coldness, or hesitation. It is an expression of calm. And I think this is a good word to put in whenever we're thinking or talking about equanimity. It's an expression of calm, radiant balance that takes whatever comes in stride. That word radiant is nice because it, like Shaila is sort of suggesting, there's a habit we have of equating equanimity with a kind of indifference or resignation. Yeah, I know better than to react when good things happen or bad things happen. And we're sort of restraining. It's sort of like a preliminary step where we know better than to get excited when something good happens because we know it's not going to last forever. we were talking about this maybe on the retreat. Shelley Graff and I led a retreat this weekend. And I think it was there where we were talking about concentration and nice experiences. And somebody was sharing about that, like the excitement when there's a really expansive, beautiful state of concentration. And, wanting it to last. So we can disturb ourselves if that habit of wanting this nice state of mind to last. But we can also disturb ourselves, disturb the mind when what arises when there's a nice state is, don't cling. So it's like, how can we just let nature unfold? It's a real profound shift because we're pretty sure that experience is going to save the day. And one way we can define wisdom, it's the deepening understanding that experience is never going to save the day. It's a radical shift in the mind's relationship to sense experience. When we say, the standard definition of nibbana or awakening is realizing the heart free of grasping, it's like saying realizing the mind, the heart, that isn't dependent on sense experience. And it's nice to say it that way because it makes us humble, like, oh, I don't know if I know that experience. The mind I know always has an agenda with sense experience, identified with our preferences, right? Is that the mind you know? Yeah. But how about the mind that it's really hands off with sense experience, but not indifferent, because indifference is sort of that resignation, or I know I shouldn't be attached because it always burns me. So we're refraining from attachment, and this is a good practice. It's like we're going somewhere, we don't have any money, but we're going somewhere with a lot of nice things are for sale that we like, right? And we practice that restraint, like, don't imagine buying that because you're not going to buy that. You can't have that. It's not for you, and it's better than letting my mind go wild, that sort of repressing or suppressing the desire, and imagining that I can actually have it, only to be betrayed when I realize, I don't have the money in the wallet. I can't buy it. But to be able to see things vividly just as they are, the beautiful and the horrific, but for it to not trigger craving or grasping, or the sense that there's a somebody who would benefit or would be harmed, not to go there. And it's really important that we, that we always ground the idea of equanimity with experience, because it's easy for the shadow to creep in. And it's there. It's probably there in all of us. There's like, oh, okay. So attachment to sense experience is the problem. So then it's sort of like we talk ourselves into, okay, Mark, don't be attached to sense experience. And one of my teachers in these 3-month retreats I did back in the 90s and a little bit later in the early 2000s at IMS, Michelle McDonald, she said once, one of the great things about being on a long retreat is that we drop some of our false equanimity. It's just too heavy. It's just too stressful to keep pretending we're equanimous. And we become a little bit more real, And when we're upset, we're not afraid. We're equanimous about being upset. Instead of thinking equanimity, oh, I'm a Buddhist, I shouldn't get upset. I should be even, right? I heard that. I heard Mark say that word even. So I'm going to be even. I'm going to have this flat drone affect, and nothing's going to bother me. And it's so nice, like real equanimity is like understanding that sometimes it's like this, and the heart is freaked out or afraid or lustful. Because that's where we start the equanimity, is realizing that's just a reactive state of mind. It feels like this, it looks like this. What does balance look like when my mind is like this? What is equanimity when it's like this? Not how to look like I'm equanimous. Reb Anderson, who was the abbot of the San Francisco Zen Center way back, maybe in the 80s or even the 70s, and has written a number of books. He's a Zen teacher, still alive, and I'm probably still the senior teacher at Green Gulch, which is owned by the San Francisco Zen Center north of San Francisco. It's a beautiful place. Some people from Common Ground have gone there to do some practice. And but in, I think one of his books, I forget where I heard this, maybe in one of his talks, he used to come to Minneapolis to teach regularly, and I'd go listen to his programs and do some of his retreats. And but he made this distinction between kind of an ordinary practitioner and somebody who's done a lot of practice. And he said, an ordinary practitioner is feeling vulnerable some of the time, but a really experienced practitioner is feeling vulnerable all the time. And so equanimity, that balance, isn't somehow convincing ourselves I'm above it all, but realizing, no, like realizing the whole catastrophe of life, how I'm an animal with animal instincts. So what does equanimity look like when we're actually grounded in the reality that we're actually all animals with our animal conditioning, right? We forget that. Billions or millions of years of evolutionary conditioning. Here it is. To be social, to be antisocial, to survive all the different reverberations of our conditioning. And the reason I'm just spending time on that is just to get a sense of how easy it is for there to be a shadow. And to really, this is why, like, sometimes at the end of a set, I'll recommend, to open the eyes, to let go of the concentration object, whatever it might be, and just to really see that the whole purpose of a deeper meditation experience is to let it go. That was the basic, the Buddha taught meditation in a number of different ways. But for people who had the capacity to go into a deep state of concentration or jhana, the whole point was to get it to a really beautiful, peaceful place, and then eventually observe it dissolve. And the mind goes from being in a very beautiful, peaceful, exalted state of concentration back to an ordinary state of consciousness, right? Because eventually it's going to fall away. It arose, the concentration arose conditionally due to supporting causes, lasted for a while. And then that would be the transition from doing a more concentration-oriented practice to doing a wisdom. The first object for the wisdom meditation is to observe that all conditioned things arise and then they cease. And then it would be a perfect time to observe if there's equanimity when the nice meditation experience falls away and other mental qualities start coming, like, oh, I want more of this, or I wonder if my sit was better than my friend over here, or whatever might come in at that moment. Oh, please don't go away. This was so nice. Go back to the to-do list and all the things I have to do, and all the messy stuff in human life, like relationships and just the way power. Shelley and a couple other leaders at the center were doing this 2-day conference that Foundation has sponsored for all the different leaders of the Buddhist Sanghas in the Twin Cities area. So there are about 30 of us. We're doing it at the Minnesota Zen Center. We brought in a teacher, trainer from Texas about power and ethics and just like how to be aware of power. And it's like, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things in the workshop, but one of the things we did this afternoon, she was just reviewing the research that people who have power, whether it's, institutional power or whatever, status power, but people who have power regularly, it inevitably has a corrupting effect around things like empathy. I mean, all kinds of demonstrable ill effects on one's personality or ways of being in community. I mean, there's ways to mediate those so-called, bad effects. But it's like that old adage. What is it, like power corrupts absolutely, or is that what it is? Power corrupts absolutely. Yeah. And there's some real truth. I mean, and it's really up to the community to mediate, because it's not like the answer is not to have anybody with power, because that's chaos, right? So people are going to have power. We need to use it, and we need to mediate those who have power, kind of manage it so that the ill effects, there's a counterweight to the ill effects. That's part of what the workshop, the 2-day workshop's about. But the reason I bring it up is it's such a messy part of our lives, just dealing with power. And so these are the places we can really, besides the meditative work with the 7 factors, really see how practical they can be in these sticky places. Mindfulness, this is being known. Investigation of Dhammas, right? But that means we're using this reflective knowing, we call mindfulness, in order to observe this heart and this community interaction, like we're in a business meeting or whatever it is, in terms of feeding suffering, feeding release. And the energy builds because we see how functional it is. It's so pragmatic to have that point of view when we go to the grocery store, when we're in a business meeting, when we're talking to our partner at home. And the joy, the rapture. Oh, this is the way to go. This is the way to live. And then the subtleness of tranquility and the concentration. So it'll be different out in the world, these 7 factors. But we really want to make them our good friend and really get interested. It's said in the tradition that the flavor, the sense of equanimity, equipoise, is for us ordinary human beings, how to have a little bit of the sense of nibbana, that balance, that radiant balance. It's like, what is the state of a Buddha? Well, it's unknowable, but understanding real equanimity, not as an indifference, as a resignation, but as a radiant balance, not easily moved, not easily thrown off. And one way that I found useful, especially in daily life, but also I'll use it in sitting practice, and you might need to find a different word, but for me, the word ease, I really like that word. And just because I've been meditating for a while and practicing for a while, I have a pretty clear memory of ease. I know what ease feels like, right? So just remembering that word, because equanimity is, one, more of a mouthful, but it's also, it has a lot of different connotations, but ease is a little bit more visceral, like contentment, contentedness. And what we mean with the word ease, like if you repeat it as a kind of mantra or reminder, it's really ease with these conditions. And now ease with these conditions. And it's really not a demand, it's not a forcing, it's just a curiosity. Ease with these conditions? Is that possible? How about being easeful with these conditions? Maybe there's a lot of doubt, like, I don't know if I can be easeful. Well, can I be easeful with the doubt? Because we want to just kind of find our way to that place where the heart has confidence in letting everything be. It's kind of that free fall. You probably remember the story because it gets told so many times of Joseph Goldstein's story about someone being thrown out of an airplane without a parachute and totally freaking out as they're falling. And after a while, realizing there's no ground to hit. And then that shift, is it a problem? And it's a little bit like playing that like, okay, it's like this. I could freak out. Because it's like Shantideva, this famous Buddhist monk from the 9th century said, if there's something you can do, do it. If there's nothing you can do, there's nothing you can do. But why be tight? I mean, that's a rough paraphrase. If there's something you can do, do it. If this moment is asking you to do something, then do it. If the moment's really not demanding that you do anything, okay, there's nothing you need to do. But why be tight? Why be reactive? Why not rest in that beautiful balance? So let me leave it here. And time for maybe a couple questions. Maybe I'll check with those online first. Any experiences of equanimity or questions come to mind? And just generally about the awakening factors. You can just raise your digital hand or unmute yourself. Anything come to mind? Yeah, is it Rocky?
Yes. Hi, Mark. First of all, thank you so much for this 8-week series. It was really helpful to just stay connected to this and practice. So my question is about the, in the meditation today, there was one instruction that you gave that I would love to get more clarification on. How do you know what is here without feeding it? I'm paraphrasing, but I think the key distinction is knowing something without feeding it, and how do you know the difference? Yeah, I would love to understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it isn't easy because our knowing, the mindfulness, is corruptible, right? There can be a filter of aversion, like I'm paying attention in order to make something go away. So that's why it's really worthwhile to presume we don't, like, we always have to come back to what mindfulness is here and now, and not to presume we're mindful. Because like I said in the guided meditation, mindfulness is that it's knowing what the mind is knowing. So it's a stepping back in order to really see what's going on. And then you'll know it doesn't really have an agenda. If there's an agenda, then mindfulness can be aware of that agenda to fix something, to make something go away. And we'll make a lot of mistakes. I try to remember the line from our facilitator today. She said about these difficult things, we can learn, I think she said something like, you can learn anything as long as you're willing to make a mess of it and, just keep failing long enough. You can learn anything. And it's the same thing with the question you're asking. We'll learn how to be aware of that and to investigate it in terms of what's skillful and unskillful. But we're going to make a lot of mistakes in exactly the way you suggest, where we're aware of it, but somehow we're feeding greed, hatred, or delusion because it's there mixed in with the awareness. But eventually we'll see, because we're planting seeds for more stress, and we'll keep stepping back, and there will be that natural investigation. What's here but not being acknowledged? Oh, I'm rushing. Or, oh, I'm aversive. Oh, I still want this to go away. Mindfulness doesn't want anything to come or go. Mindfulness is just recognizing what the mind is knowing. It's just an honest recollection. Oh, this is what's being known. And we shouldn't be certain that our mindfulness is mindful. Yeah, thanks for the great comment.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Anybody in the room here have a comment, example that you'd like to share, or a question that comes to mind about equanimity or the factors of awakening? I'll just mention a few. Someone asked about the winter course. So we finished our 4 foundations of mindfulness. In the winter, we're going to do metta, loving kindness, and compassion. And then in the spring, we'll do mudita and equanimity again, but more from the Brahma Vihara, the divine abode perspective, although there's definitely a lot of overlap. So that will begin on January 10th, 8 Mondays, beginning that second Monday of January. So please join in. We'll send out, probably Gabe will send out an email to all of you on the Buddhist Studies email list to register for that in a month or so. And coming up, Shelley's going to be doing the half-day retreat on the 13th. That's 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time. And that same day in the afternoon, Ramesh Sairam, one of our other Dharma teachers, is doing his mindfulness and physical pain 1 to 4 on Saturday the 13th. And Shelley Graff, Common Ground's other guiding teacher, and Yang O, who is mostly in residence in Durango, but he teaches around the country, will be leading the year-end retreat, because I'll be teaching out at IMS at the Forest Refuge all of December. So this year, for the first time in 29 years or so, I'm not doing the year-end retreat. Shelley and Yang are going to do it. And I think it's going to be great. That will be both in person here at the city center, but also online for anybody who doesn't live in Minneapolis or just would prefer to practice at home. And finally, there's the twice annual community practice intensive in December. And I believe both Shelley and Gabe Keller Flores are going to be leading that. And that will be about 17 days, 2 Monday nights, and then it ends with a day long, just upping your daily practice for that period of time. We do it every December and we do it every June. So you can join in for that. There'll probably be information sent out in the middle of November in the weekly email. And maybe that's a good prompt to say to folks, if you're not getting the weekly email, but you do feel part of the community, you might want to get on that weekly email. And you can sign up on our website under the About Us. Something there will allow you to sign yourself up, or just send the center an email saying you want to get the weekly program update email, and we'll get you on that list. I really enjoyed the course. Wishing you a good couple of months. Hope to see you at the January course if it makes sense for you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everybody.
Thanks,
you
Mark.
so
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Good wishes on your travels.
Oh, thank you. And thanks to Kevin and the other people who helped do the program hosting. It was really nice to have it all taken care of.